Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the February 13th Council Workshop. I will now call to order the workshop session. First item is discussion and updates regarding the solar eclipse event 2024. Chief Smith.
Are we on? There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's always good to be in front of you. I wanted to go over a few things and bring you up to speed with where we're at as far as planning on the eclipse of 2024. We had a meeting this past Wednesday at 10 o'clock over here at City Hall. The same people were there that we've been having, but we did add a few people onto this one. We had Wesley Alexander that we added from Hamilton EMS. We definitely will be working with them as far as when it comes to public safety and what to anticipate during that time. We also had Angela Rainwater in attendance. She is the emergency management coordinator for the county of Lampasas. So we added her in on this also as it continues to build out from beyond just the city. The last person that we had in attendance would be Stacy Ibarra. She's our new economic development director. As y'all know, we brought her in because she's definitely going to be a part of this as we move forward. First thing we did was we reviewed our goals. Here again, public safety for all citizens of Lampasas and those who visit during the event. Normalcy for our citizens. We're focused on preparing our citizens for the event by communicating with them as to what to expect, whether it be increased traffic, a decrease in the availability of items at the grocery store or business, and then satisfaction, approval overall. When this is all said and done, we want to make sure that they feel like we did a good job in planning adequately for this event. A couple of things that we did review. We took a look at the timeline that we had established previously going into this, see where we're at as far as following that timeline with this previous meeting. In the month of January, we were able to get quite a few people with some of the NIMS classes, the ICS 300 and 400 classes. This goes back to public safety, includes public works as far as that goes. So we did have 7 personnel from Fire and Lampasas Police Department. They completed the ICS 300 and 400. This is a major class. This is a class that lasts all week long. It's a 40-hour class, and they drill down as far as this is. It's not just managing an incident, it's managing a ever-expanding large incident. This would be on the lines of floods, tornadoes, anything like that, but you can make it applicable for Spring Hoe or for the eclipse of 2024. So that's what we're doing with that. Other than that, we also have taken a look as far as inside of the department, what can we anticipate during that time? Have we identified all the needs that we're going to have as a department? Are we going to have the manpower that we need for this time and what we can project out as far as what may be some of the incidents? So we've reviewed that and just making sure that we're on the same page as far as what the size of this is going to be and what we can anticipate. Going after that, moving forward, one more thing. Members of the Chamber of Commerce at this meeting and the Visitor Center, they left early, and I'm not saying that to tattletale on them. I'm saying that to let you know that they've been in attendance to several meetings, Hill Country Alliance. This past Wednesday, they also went down to Burnett County. They had a big meeting that they attended down there. This involved, of course, all of Burnett County and all the cities represented there. And I believe that they have a kind of a group with several of the cities that are through there, or several of the counties that are through there, not only Burnett County, but Llano County and maybe Blanco County, that they're going in together with to plan this. I know that Melissa and Ross, Oliver, they've attended this and they've gathered quite a bit of information. And I think that in the next month prior to me coming up here and saying, hey, here's where we're at and what we're doing, we're going to get a lot of that information and be able to make even more plans with that. They've had an extremely busy week as they've got a big event this weekend. So we've not been able to get with them last week. At the end of the week or this week, I don't anticipate getting with them either. So I'll have that meeting with them and update you after that. But moving forward, we discussed the items that begin of March. This may happen even at the latter end of this month. I know that Melissa has been doing quite a bit of stuff. Monica has been doing quite a bit of stuff. They've worked together as far as getting some information together to put on a website, to get on the City of Lampasas website. Our goal is that we would be able to direct people to that location, especially once we go live per se after we have the town hall meeting. We're also planning on how we're going to get the word out to everybody that we do want you to come to this town hall meeting. It will be April the 5th of 2023. We hope that we have a good turnout for that, and we hope that people are enthusiastic as far as wanting to get involved and plan activities here in the city of Lampasas. But here again, that's going to be up to them. We've been planning for the public safety response to that for the citizens here in Lampasas. So we want to make sure that we get that information to them. Having information on the website to direct people for information and FAQs. Part of this is also creating the answers to those FAQs. A lot of this, we need to have something more than just talk to Loopy at the front desk. We want them to be able to call up and get to the right person once we get there with that. As we talked about, the directors should plan on a variety of options to deliver the normal services. These normal services that they provide, they may not be during normal operations. This includes not only public safety, but parks, anybody in here, streets, they may have to make some decisions just out there as they come up, and we'll take all of this and we'll hope that we make the best decision by practicing this ahead of time. We'll also begin working a tabletop exercise that will evaluate the city's preparedness and the level of preparedness for this event. After April the 5th, the town hall meeting, we want to be able to go live with the website. We want to be able to have people and direct them to that website, the City of Lampasas website. That way we can cut down on maybe some of the calls and being bombarded with a lot of stuff like that. So if we can make that available to them, that would be our goal. And then we're also looking at expanding the members of the group that we're meeting with. As this grows, as we get closer, we're obviously going to have some outside resources that we partner with. We're going to have the LISD and their involvement in this. Are they going to have school that day or not? We're still waiting to find out the answer on that. You may know something I don't know.
On the one and only calendar we were presented, they have school off.
Okay, well, there you go. I don't know if that's
Is that good or
is
bad?
that a concrete thing? There you go. Now everybody knows you don't have school April 5th, 2024, or April 8th, 2024. We'll also look at getting TxDOT out there. I'm sure that we're going to have to work with them as far as making things go smoothly here in the city of Lampasas during that time. So we're going to bring them in also. The last thing I want to tell you, as we move forward with this, the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Director are going to be critical in working with our businesses. We've worked the piece so far, like I said earlier, as far as public safety and how the city of Lampasas is going to respond to the needs of the citizens. But in all the different areas that they've gone to, from north of here in San Saba and then moving down south of here through Kerrville and Fredericksburg and everything, it's a big piece of that as far as what the businesses are going to do. And I think that's where the Chamber of Commerce and our newest employee, Stacy Ibarra, are going to really have to meet with these businesses and help them get the information that they need as far as planning this out, how they're going to work with them and those types of things. So it's probably going to be more and more critical that we support them as far as what they're doing and give them what they need. And we may be even forming some new committees and stuff like that to work with strictly the businesses and how to represent here in Lampasas. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Yes, sir. When do you start letting the word out about April 5th so that everyone can find out that?
We're planning on doing that March 1st. That was our goal, is to have it there, but I think that with some of the stuff that's already been created, we're wanting to go ahead and put that on a website and start pushing that out. We've also already been on the radio, the morning show, that type of stuff. Alex is somebody at the newspaper that I get calls from frequently and already have today about something else, but we'll get that in the newspaper that we're having that meeting. So we hope that we'll get the word out to everybody that we're having that meeting and that we can give them a lot of information. And then some of the questions that they have, we'll be able to answer right away. And some of the questions that they have, we're going to have to go, we haven't thought of that yet. We'll get back to you. So.
Good.
Any range of how many visitors could possibly show up?
As far as how many visitors are coming and everything, there's all kinds of speculation. We've read all kinds of reports from Washington State through Wyoming and from the last eclipses. Some of them say that, hey, there'll be 100,000 people here, and some of them say it'll be 3 times your population. Either one of those, it seems to be that it's going to be more than what's here on a typical spring hoe weekend. So we'll definitely have that. In talking with DPS and talking with Texas Department of Emergency Management, TxDOT, they are taking this seriously, and they are starting to plan ahead right now. That's a good thing for us, because as they're planning this, they're not only planning at the state level, but they're also going to need to work with local jurisdictions as far as how to manage something like this. The bad side of that is we're along that 281 route here, so everybody north of us and south of us that we would call for resources, we're probably going to be similar to what we were during the Winter Storm Uri, as far as there'll be some points where we're just going to have to see what we can do with what we have. I know there's already been discussion as far as pre-positioning resources from the state, but even if they put those right here in Lampasas, where we have 281 north and south, where we have 190 east and west and 183, if they keep those here, they still may deploy those somewhere else where they're needed. If they're called first to go south of here, then they're going to be going south of here prior to just staying around here in case something happens here.
How about the county? Is the county, you guys are involved with the county too? Is that right?
We are involved with the county. Like I said, they were here in this last meeting. Judge Hoyer was also wanting to be here, but he got tied up in a probate hearing. But they're coming along with us now, making some plans. Probably the biggest thing with that, the smaller cities here in the county, and then the county itself, when you look at the city of Lampasas and what we do, we are the paid fire department, the police department. The sheriff's office is obviously planning in this. They're involved in some monthly meetings that we have with a different group. But most of the resources that we have here in the county are going to be provided by the city of Lampasas. So I think as long as we're preparing and working in conjunction with the county officials, I think we're going to have some good resources here that we can deploy as needed.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next item is discussion regarding fiscal year 2021, 2022 year-end financial report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Part of our mutual responsibility as elected officials as well as appointed officials is to make sure that you are a good steward for public funds. We do this annually. We provide you some updates throughout the year as well, but this represents a complete picture of how we did in our last fiscal year. I'm going to be referring to, you have a booklet in front of you, and I'm going to stay just basically on the first several pages of the first section, the narrative portion. My intent tonight is to try to hit the high points of this, as well as give you, I think, hopefully some perspective on what we need to be watching out for. And I think there are some things that will pop out that are pretty clear that we need to pay attention to. We had a good year. First of all, I'll say that. Considering some things that we were continuing to go through in terms of in Winter Storm Uri and COVID coming off of that, it's not back to normal, but it's kind of a new normal. What we'll also do is take a look at what else is included in the book, our contents, and then what we typically do is I will present tonight, and then at the following meeting, give you the opportunity to ask any additional questions, and then acknowledge or accept the financial report that was given to you. But just to go through the narrative portion, like I said, we kind of consider this a new normal. We're still plagued by difficulty in obtaining parts and supplies. We've talked to you on and off about the electric market and what's going on with the cost to make sure that our grid is more reliable. That is ultimately a cost that's borne by the providers and the retail users of that electricity if you're on the ERCOT grid. We also point out to a couple of things that did happen last year in terms of ARPA funding. We did receive the second ARPA fund for total fund that we have designated for improvements to water and wastewater at the business park, water looping, relocation, emergency generation, and fire department apparatus. So we did note that. That's not part of your operating budget, but that's a significant financial event that happened in FY22. We also closed in May of 22 on the 2022 certificates of obligation. That par amount was about $6.4 million. The funds that were identified and even conditioned on to be used for were the water plant and pre-treatment upgrades, hostess house rehabilitation, upper pressure plane improvements, water wastewater shop exterior improvements, water and sewer line replacements and upgrades, and improvements at the Calvert Building. The council did, I think, take a very proactive and I think a very positive step in FY22 in terms of mid-year compensation increases. I think you heard from the chief of police and other various departments talk about, and it's not just municipalities, it's all over the marketplace. You can't find enough people to work at McDonald's. You can't find enough people to do a number of different jobs. So I think that was an incredibly proactive step by council to do that. We also did provide, there were some modest increases in utility fees in FY22. The one thing that I do want to remind you of is that these statements that we're providing you have been closed out, but they are pre-audit. So a lot of times after the audit, the auditor may make some adjustments in the statements. Look, when we present to you, and we do this year in and year out, we use the same set of books. This is based on the budget that council approved and the expenditures on that budget. So next year, if you pull the audit report out and it shows something slightly different, that's an adjustment they made. Typically, it's to capitalize and depreciate. So you take those capital expenses that we had, and then you claim those into depreciation after the auditors get through it. But in terms of what you budgeted, this is what the report is based on. There are 5 tabs in this booklet. One is the narrative, where we try to give you some kind of 30,000-foot perspective on the issues and trends and perspectives that the numbers match up to. We also, if you have a specific question, you also have the departmental performance by major account. So, for example, if you had a specific question, regardless if it's a big number or little number, you wanted to know how the hostess house was doing, you know, you can take a look at, you go to that tab, go to page 24 in that tab, and you're going to see department by major account event venues, which is primarily the hostess house. And just to help you kind of know how to read this, the first column is what happened last year at the end of the year, FY21. Second column is the actual for the fourth quarter of FY22, so that's year end, so you've got perspective on what you did compared to FY22 compared to the previous year. The annual budget amount, that's the budget that council approved, and then the variance to budget, variance to previous year. So for example, if we use the event or the hostess house, you can see that in the fourth quarter, through the year in FY22, they brought in a little over $22,000 on a budget of $8,500. That was $14,000 better than planned, and about $9,500 better than the previous plan. If you look on the expense side, they were budgeted to spend about $8,400. You only spent $5,700, so you were underspent by $2,700, but you spend about $1,000 more than you did the previous year. All in all, it's a real positive report, and I always try to tell people that the numbers tell a story. You need perspective. So that tells you the story not only of the hostess house, but that tells you the story about what staff's doing, how we market that event venue, the time and dedication that Vicki and the park staff spend on it. So I think that's just one example. So if you had a question about police department, you'll find a police department page in there, or sanitation, or the Citizens Collection Station. Just take a look there. You also have in their balance sheets. Balance sheets are a snapshot as of September 30th. It tells you how much money you had, and that's the next tab. It tells you how much money you have, whether it's designated or not, what sort of liabilities you have, what sort of land you own at that particular day and time. So that's particularly helpful if you want to know where the money is. What do we have in fund balance? What's the health of the electric fund versus the general fund? Those are all items that you can glean through your balance sheets. The next tab is your investment report. And this is something council receives typically on a monthly basis. This gives you an idea of how much you have invested in what area. There are some key indicators that I would always encourage us and council to look at. That's the weighted average maturity. I mean, how long is that money tied up? We typically have a very low weighted average maturity. We could have probably afford to spread that out and maybe with the end game of getting a little bit higher yield. But again, we operate under the Public Funds Investment Act. That's what authorizes us to operate and put money in these types of investments. Your investment managers are, per policy, Yvonne Moreno and myself. So typically, if we move money around, Yvonne and I get together and say, yes, we can move money from here to here, and that's, we meet the obligation of the Investment Act by providing you that report on a monthly basis. And then we have some supplemental information in the back that's various non-operating balance sheets, some information. The very last page is a 4-year look at our performance. So the very last page in the book, we just put the last 4 years. And again, these numbers represent apples to apples. These are all pre-audit numbers. So you can see FY19, about $1 million surplus, $2 million in FY20. FY21, of course, was Winter Storm Uri and also some additional impacts of COVID. That was a pretty tight year. And then this year, you can see our overall performance. We finished the year with about a $727,000 surplus. One thing that I will remind you of probably more than once is that of that $727,000, we've got $400,000 of that is really earmarked for the fire engine. So that's we came out that much more ahead, but remember that includes the $400,000 that we've earmarked for the fire engine. I'll skip on to revenue. Revenue was good. We brought in about 98% of our budgeted revenue last year. One thing that I will tell you early and often is the distinction between transfer revenue and transfer expense. So we were $1 million short on transfer income. That transfer income typically comes from other funds or even from reserves that we bring into the budget for a special project. The most common one is a transfer from electric to general. So the fact that we didn't get $1 million in revenue really is a good sign. It means that we didn't have to expend $1 million in transfers from other departments to feed that revenue. So really it's probably a good indication of the performance of other departments. So if your golf course didn't need as much money, their transfer revenue was reduced, but also the transfer expenditure from whatever fund it was coming from, by example. I think a couple of things that we'd want to point out to you is tax revenue was good, and that's based primarily on sales tax revenue, and we'll go into that in just a second. We also had some other areas where we had service revenue that was well above expectations in the cemetery, hostess house, and golf course. Those are all departments that performed above expectations. The tax revenue, as I mentioned, exceeded the budgeted expectations by $520,000, and that was primarily due to sales tax receipts of about $2.3 million, and that was about a little over $400,000 better than our budget, and about $200,000 better than previous year. And you can tell just by those numbers, we tend to budget very conservatively on sales tax. Other revenue, and this is a big portion. So the other revenue is a major account, and then there's several, 15, 20 minor accounts that make up other revenue. But that makes up about 68.5% of our budget. A majority of that is going to be utility revenue. It came in, other revenue came in basically on target. We do point out that there was positive performance from other revenue in the animal shelter, aviation, electric, water, and wastewater. When we talk about not only the single biggest contributor to our revenue mix being electric sales, but also just utility sales in general that make up about 59% of our revenue for FY22. We just point out that, there were some great performances there. The electric was up about 107% of budgeted expectations, about $1 million better than previous year. Water retail sales were up about 4.2% over expectations, and about $280,000 in previous year. Wastewater sales were up slightly, about $30,000 better than previous year. So I want to start to paint a picture here just briefly. Revenue comes up for utility expense, and remember the other thing that hangs over utility expenses is the impact of weather, right? The hotter it is, the more kilowatts you sell to cover the air conditioning. The less it rains. Generally, not so much as back in the old days, but typically you sell more water during hot, dry times as well. So, yes, they performed well from a revenue standpoint, but we also have some contrasting expenses that also went up that we'll talk about when we go into the expense line. Expenditures, we spent less than was budgeted, about $1.2 million. That was also about $180,000 better than previous year. Everything was pretty much on target, in line, pretty close. We had, if you look at what's on your screen, you can see if you're down the expense lines, salaries were within 146 of budget, or underspent 146,000. Everything looks, fairly close, with the exception of transfers, what we've talked about. The bracket under the transfers, and I'm looking at variance to budget. You've got a bracketed $1.2 million. That means you underspent transfers by that amount. Okay, if you go back up to supplies, we overexpended supplies by over $1 million compared to plan. We were $346 better than we were last year, but last year we also had Winter Storm Uri that we had a huge increases in supplies related to the cost of electricity. So that's the one that sticks out that I want to spend just a little bit of time on. Well, first maybe, according to the narrative, I've got to tell you about salary expense. Salary and benefits were about 28% of your total expenses. And the one thing that I do want to point out to you is that salaries, just that account was underspent, that major account was underspent by $146,000. And remember, council also took the step to do a global compensation and targeted market increases mid-year. Those were unbudgeted. That total in that was about $152,000, $153,000. So even doing that, you still came in under your budgeted salary expense, and that's a direct result of basically we don't have 100% employment 100% of the time. So that's due to vacancies, et cetera. So talking a little bit about supplies, and again, supplies is a major account, and then there are a bunch of accounts underneath it. Like I said, we're about $1 million overspent in that line, and that's really, it's broke down to three things. Cost of electricity, reservation of raw water with Brazos River Authority, and cost of water. So I think we've talked quite a bit about electric reliability and the cost of providing that reliability. We're seeing increasing expenses for making sure that there's enough reserve on the grid, to making sure that we're not congested, so we're seeing more congestion costs. We are insulated in terms of a fixed cost, right? We know that every kilowatt is going to be X number of dollars. It's all those secondary settlement charges and those ancillary costs that continue to climb up based on the market. The water reservation, as council's been made aware of, in FY22, or at the end of beginning of FY22, we had a couple of contracts come up with BRA, and we had to renew those. Those are long-term contracts. They were, I think the original date on one or two of them was, one was in the 80s, and there may have been another one that was a little later. When they renewed, the price increased dramatically, and I think it was council's, again, I think it's a good thing that council did, but you deliberated and felt like the one thing that we cannot be short on is water. And so you took the step to do that, and I think it was a wise step, but it did cost us. And then the cost of water and water delivery, we're seeing increased costs. We're using more water, and we're always also seeing some increased costs related to the treatment, the electricity to push that water to us. And so those things that I think, if I were to say, council, we really need to look, utility costs and utility rates are probably the number one thing on my list based on what I'm seeing from FY22. Capital expenses were down to plan a little bit, and that happens typically every year. We just don't get around everything, as well as we're also seeing some, I'm not saying a real slowdown, but it's taking more time. People are busier in terms of design work, engineering work, architectural work. And again, we've been talking about transfer expenses. Transfers were, expense was about a little over $1 million better than budget. I'm just going to spend a real quick minute and talk about some other indicators. And these, if all of these went away, it wouldn't make 1% of our overall budget, but they're still kind of interesting things to look at. And they think they also paint a picture of what's going on. So obviously we look at sales tax. Sales tax over the last 6 years have increased on an average of 11% a year. That's pretty dramatic. If you take a look at particularly the last, since FY 2021, that's when it really start to pick up. Mixed drink tax, and I think that's, you did a couple things historically that can kind of reference that. One is we annexed putters and gutters in 2019, and then we also passed a local option in 2019. And I think maybe through COVID people got thirstier. I'm not sure, but customers in our utilities is not dramatic, but you see the biggest number, and it's actually customers is not the correct term. It's really meters. So we're seeing the electric really scoot up. Not a little less than 3% over that period of time. I think the only other thing I would say is that I think growth impacts on infrastructure will continue to be a theme for Lampasas in coming years. Council, I think, need to keep an eye out for increasing costs of providing water and electricity. I think the city is positioned well financially and maintains required levels of reserves, and staff performed well in 2022 and is committed to meeting the needs of council stakeholders and our citizens. I'd be happy to take any questions, or certainly if you read it tonight and you want to call me in the morning, you can ask. Just kidding. Any questions on that?
Any questions or concerns? Thank you, sir. Next item is discussion regarding Fund 40, project gap funding related to the Hostess House rehabilitation.
This should be on your screen, Council. I believe I sent it to you by email as well on Friday. We just wanted, I wanted to provide you this meeting as kind of a reminder of what we've been talking about over the last, it's actually more than 2 years ago. A lot of these slides here are recycled on what's been delivered to you, but the whole idea is we didn't want to get you to February 27th when we're scheduled to take a look at the Hostess House bids without doing this. We don't want to provide you, hey, this is how we fund it, remember, and this is the Hostess House bids. We want to try to warm you up with this agenda item prior to the 27th. When you'll be asked to consider with the Hostess House bids. So we just want to touch base on the fact that, yes, we're doing this anticipation of the bids opening. Bids have been moved back from tomorrow to the 21st. That was a result of several general contractors calling us that were impacted by the ice storm, lack of electricity, lack of internet. I want to provide you some reminders on what we talked about on October 17th, as well as the 24th. A review of the funding sources, a historical review of Fund 40, and discussion on other sources, options, and alternatives. So just as a reminder, And this is the most recent action. This isn't an all-inclusive list of the dates and the content of our discussion and actions. But just as a recollection, October 17th, council workshop, we met at the Hostess House with Reliance Architecture. And I think regardless of where you wanted that project to go, I think everybody felt like Antonio gave us a comprehensive presentation in terms of what he was seeing, what the new costs were, what the scope creep was, et cetera. On October 24th, we brought that back down to council, and again, some of the same slides we used there we'll see today. They've just been updated. When we talked about funding assumptions, estimates, and future bidding. The 24th council on their regular agenda did approve by a split vote to go ahead and advertise for bids, and then we're waiting for those bids to come in next Tuesday. So over probably the last 2 years, council has identified two sources of funding, Fund 40, hot funds, as well as Fund 65, which is the 2022 CO. The hot fund project allocating earmarks approximately $800,000. Remember, and that's really tied to that fourth bullet point, is that we wanted to maintain a minimum level within Fund 40 of $200,000. And what I'm going to show you is actually going to be a little less than $200,000, but we'll talk through that. And again, we don't know what the project is going to cost. You've got an enormous amount of ad alternates to look at, as well as the bid itself. So, and again, this is a spreadsheet that we've looked at previously. This is something that we presented actually over the last 12 months in March, July, September, and October. We just simply updated the numbers based on the life cycle of the various projects, based on the year-to-date expenditures and the fund balance. So you see we start with the fund balance as of January 31 of $1.2 million. That's been brought down a little bit. That's due to what we've been spending on pavilion, skate park, a little bit of the Hostess House to date, the Hannah Spring fencing, as well as some marks there, or some yet to be expended funds for wayfinding signage. So we see that after all of the estimated costs remaining are taken from that fund balance, then you're looking at about $176,000 in addition. That's if you use money for the Hostess House in that amount. The one thing that I do want to talk to you a little bit about is kind of what's the performance of Fund 40 been. So this presumes that there's no net increase in that fund. Over the last, 6 or 10 years, it's grown by about $55,000 on average a year. If you look at FY, and these columns are by fiscal year, FY 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. If you look at the bottom 2 rows of numbers, that's your total expense and then your net. The percentage is the percent of revenue that you've spent within that fund. So you've netted $43,000, $94,000, $47,000, $84,000. Yeah, FY22 you took a bath, minus $223,000, but you built a pavilion, you started a skate park, you did all the things that council said move forward on. So even though this number says 176, I think council, this is a snapshot in time. This does not account for any future earnings. And you can see our revenue from Fund 40. In FY18, the total revenue was about $160,000. You see FY22, it's grown to $227, and that's with a hit of COVID in between. So the picture I'm trying to paint is that the fund is healthy, it's sustainable. You're not, with the exception of what you want to do in terms of some focused projects, it's a sustainable fund. So even though that fund has dropped off in FY '22, the fund balance I'm talking about, and this is a snapshot as of September 30, you can still see it's grown basically 8.3% over that period of time, even with a $233,000 hit based on, I think, some important projects. So allocations from other funds, this is the same slide that we've included in a number of different presentations to council. These are funds that we identified from Fund 65, which was a 2022 CO issue, which includes in the second line there Hostess House rehabilitation, $800,000, and then the other projects that we spoke about briefly through the finance report about. I think and again, this is a very quick, just updated slides on this, but we wanted to do this ahead of what action you may or may not take on the 27th. Just a reminder that the cost for the Hostess House will be determined by bid. We can have all the estimates in the world. I can guarantee you the estimate will be wrong. It will be different than whatever bid you come in. It may be a little higher, may be lower. I think council will have some rather tedious decisions to make in terms of ad alternates, because there's a whole list of them. And there's some of them that if I was sitting in your seat, I wouldn't move forward on, probably under any circumstance. You do have the capacity, have planned for this funding. I think the trend in Fund 40 is positive and sustainable. If for some reason, council has asked me to do this before, and if for some reason you say, do we have an extra 50, 100,000, 150? Staff would be happy to take that on and say, hey, we got 68 here that we have some excess fund balance. We've got 63 that we have some excess fund balance. And that's something I try to present to council, particularly during the budget process, because those are untapped, and as long as the conditions of those funds allow for those expenditures, ultimately it's council's decision. And then we just, like I said, we wanted to at least touch base with you on these items before the 27th. That way that hopefully we don't throw too much at you on the 27th. So this warms you up to that potential consideration that council will make, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any comments or thoughts, questions?
I was looking at that new, because I think that your idea of using some of our old fund balances and shifting some of those toward that Hostess House renovation to kind of loosen up some of the 40, the hot funds, because there's so much that can be done with those hot funds that we have so much potential. I just really am hesitant to get it down to as low, I'd like to keep it a little higher than the 200 if possible. But like you said, we're not going to know anything until we get the bids.
Yeah, I would, we'll certainly pull those fund balances together, and I think council probably remembers, every now and then usually 3 or 4 times a year, I'll show you fund balance of non-operating funds, and I'd be happy to prepare those for you. But I think you are correct. I think until you see a number, and you can say, boy, this is an easy decision, or this is not an easy decision, or it's not worth making a decision over, then we can go from there.
And council as a whole decided 200,000 was appropriate, so I would think we'd come back with another decision at a later date if we decided 200 wasn't adequate.
And if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call.
Any other questions or comments? Next item is discussion regarding any item on the regular agenda. Anyone have any questions? Do we need a break? I'd like to grab water. Sure. Break? We'll take a 5-minute break. Need a motion to adjourn the workshop?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We'll meet back in 5. Comments, if you would give us a prayer, please.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this great opportunity tonight to come to you with open hearts and open minds and take care of your people's business. We pray that you'll be with everyone here, that we can pass information, share ideas, and that decisions can be made for the betterment of your entire community, which is your will. We ask that you'll be with us in safety, forgive us of our sins, and until we can meet again, as always, in Jesus' name, amen.
Please join me in the pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
We have no presentations or proclamations. We do have 4 public hearings. I will call the first one to order. Citizen comments. Any citizen who desires to address the city council on a matter that is not included on the agenda may do so at this time. The city council may not deliberate on items presented under this agenda item. Do we have anyone wishing to speak?
No.
Yes, sir. Have you signed your name?
Thank you for having me. My name is Jacob. I walked into Lampasas maybe at the beginning of this year. I heard a lot of good things about the people here, and I'm here to tell you that it's true what they said. Lampasas is full of good people, so I really appreciate that. I'm basically trying to establish myself here in this town, live a normal life, et cetera, et cetera. I do have some hobbies. I'm a cop watcher, I'm an auditor, I'm a free member of the press, I'm a locksmith, I'm a dancer, et cetera. I have other talents too, but I'm just here to let you know and notify you of an issue that is going on where I live, and that is the drug issue. Whenever you see me, I'm gonna be speaking about drugs. I mean, the issue on drugs, okay? We have an issue here in Lampasas where we have people, citizens, who are occupying time that could be used in the work area. We could have people contributing into the infrastructure in the work area here, but instead they're hiding in their places where they hide, and they're putting my house where I live at risk. If it wasn't for my dogs, I know my house would be broken into already, property would be missing, and it's not the case in every residential home here in Lampasas, obviously. Thank God for that. But I think that, you know, if we have enough manpower, if we have enough sophisticated technology, that if I was to use drugs and break the law and go and do that in one of these parks or in any of these motel rooms, I would have to pay the price for that. I would be held up to the law, and I would be brought in and processed just like every other criminal. So what I'm trying to say is that there's no excuse for breaking the law, obviously. We need to uphold the law and be members in this society where we are safe, correct? So why isn't it that instead of just putting up the names of the people that are being caught in the radiogram, why don't we put some pressure on these people and in the places that they live, where they're staying up all night, staying up late all night, sleeping all day during the day, and just being a nuisance. I mean, people call me a nuisance, but I think people have it twisted. I'm not a nuisance. I'm just here to call out on the ones who are a nuisance. There's nuisance here. It's happening here, and I don't think that we should tolerate it. When you see me, I'll be talking about it and talking about today. The Lampasas Police Department showed up, and for a change, it wasn't because of me who called them. So thank you, Lampasas Police Department, for showing up and doing whatever it is that you do, because I woke up and went to work pretty pleased to see that. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next item is citizen comments. Any citizen who desires to address the city council on a matter that is on the agenda may do so at this time. Do we have anyone? Third item, public hearing to receive citizen comments regarding the preliminary plat for the estates of Gibson Branch, Phase 1, 187.36 acres, a subdivision within the extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ, of the city of Lampasas, Lampasas County, Texas.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The City of Lampasas has plat approval authority for the subdivision within the ETJ per the 1445 agreement with the county. This intent is to alleviate the developer having to go to more than one entity for approval. So I kind of want to give you a breakdown of a staff report that I've prepared for this plat approval because this is kind of a unique situation. So back in fall of 2021, Mr. Charlie Brown began working with the county and the city regarding the development. The developers have consulted with an attorney to create bylaws, covenants, and aviation and clearance easement documents. The developers worked with the Commissioner Rainwater regarding Lampasas County subdivision regulations, Steve Hamrick with TxDOT regarding a deceleration lane on 281, and with City regarding plat requirements. In April of 2022, the preliminary plat was approved by the Planning Commission and by the City Council. However, it did expire in October of 2022. Since that time, the developers have been working with Maples and Associates and Goodson Surveyors to finalize the civil plans for subdivision. In October 2022, Joe England, the county engineer, Judge Hoyer, and Commissioner Rainwater agreed to the subdivision being designed and constructed to the City of Lampasas subdivision and construction detail specifications. Mr. Kriegel, who's the engineer of record, he delivered the civil plans to staff in January of 2023. Roadways will not be adopted or maintained by the city or by the county. The maintenance of the subdivision will be the responsibility of the homeowners association. Outside jurisdiction for city zoning regs, so there's nothing that we can regulate regarding any type of zoning. And then the utilities will be provided by Hamilton Electric, the septic system, and then Corex Water. This was heard before my planning commission, and they did recommend approval to council.
Any questions? Anyone in the audience wish to speak to this? We'll close this public hearing then. Next item is public hearing to receive citizen comments regarding the final plat for the estates of Gibson Branch, Phase 1, 187.36 acres, a subdivision within the ETJ of the city of Lampasas, Lampasas County, Texas.
For the sake of time, I'm not going to reread everything to you again, but it's the same requirements regarding the subdivision for the final plat as well. And again, my planning commission did recommend approval to the city council.
Any comments or questions? Anyone in the audience wish to address? One question here.
So with this being in the ETJ, with the city growing, if that's annexed in down the road, but we have no regulations out there and no infrastructure?
Annexation of property is voluntary by the developers, and at this time, we have no utilities connecting to that subdivision, so we would not necessarily annex that property in. It's going to be basically the homeowner association will take care and maintain the property in the subdivision.
Right.
So as far as annexation, that's not something that's on the table for us.
I'm just talking about like down the road, 10, 15, 20 years from now, as the city grows. I mean, that's just a little pocket that self-governed in the middle.
And the legislature may have something to say about that as well, but we're seeing that that's the ability to unilaterally annex is, of course, non-existent anymore. So if there's a change in the legislature or is it a change in the desire of the property owners, then yes.
Who's providing the security? Is that going to be the SO or the PD?
Security?
Yeah, like for if they get called out, like in 911.
It's a county. It would be
Okay,
the
so it'll be the
sheriff.
county. Okay.
Anything else? Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Close the public hearing. Next item is minutes, discussion and possible action concerning approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on January 23, 2023.
I didn't see any corrections, recommend approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions about that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We do have 4 items. Davis is abstaining.
I wasn't here.
4 items on the consent agenda. We have number 1, discussion and possible action regarding the second reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 54, Parks and Recreation, City of Lampasas Code of Ordinances, adding skate park rules and creating appropriate signage for safety and well-being of the community. Number 2, discussion and possible action regarding the second reading of an ordinance regarding the proposed 35 miles per hour speed zone for Lampasas High School on Highway 281 from mile point 28.649 to mile point 29.938, totaling 0.289 miles. Item number 3, discussion and possible action regarding purchases and charges in excess of $4,000 from January 1 to January 31, 2023. Number 4, discussion and possible action regarding December 2022 investment report. Does anyone wish to remove any item from the consent agenda?
I would like to ask a question about item 3.1.
Item what?
3.1. It's just on the sign verbiage.
That should be pulled from the consent.
Okay, we'll pull 3.1. Anyone else want to pull anything? Can we get a ruling on the 2, 3, and 4?
Recommend approval of the consent agenda for item 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4.
A second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 3.1. Question?
Yes, ma'am. My question, I mean, it's small, but it's on the back, on the sign verbiage, y'all have please no gum. I think that it needs to, the please needs to be removed. I think there needs to, you know, because I think having gum, food, and drinks in the skate park needs to be, the please needs to be removed.
Do we need a vote on the please, or can we just vote on the consent agenda 3.1?
You take 3.1 up as a standalone item, so you would make a motion with that amended language on.
So I move that we approve 3.1 with removal of the please on the sign.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We do not have any board or department reports. We do have the city manager's operational report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll be brief. These items are included in your packet. Staff and the mayor met with the new general manager of Kempner Water Supply Corporation on January 30th. His name is Bruce Sorensen. He's got a pretty lengthy career in the water and wastewater field, and I think we had a great first meeting. They are waiting for a complete system-wide water modeling study, and at his suggestion, he said, let's get that water modeling study and get your distribution staff and our distribution staff in the same room and try to figure out how we can work a little bit better. There's some opportunities there maybe for some control of valves or being able to move water from one point of delivery to the other. So we certainly feel like there's some opportunities. Those staffs already do work very closely together, but I think under Mr. Sorensen's leadership, it'll take it to another level. We did also suggest that after that process is done, probably within the next 30 days, we have a meeting between City Council and the board of Kempner Water Supply Corporation. The last time we did that was 7 years ago. I went and looked this up because I think we got caught off guard when we went to a meeting down in Kempner, and we just haven't been able to meet since then. So I think that's a positive thing as well. Business Park, as you have asked previously, we have included pay apps 7 and 8. That was approved by the consulting engineer and city staff. That project did come in ahead of schedule and on target. The only change order involved was a reduction in about $71,000. So I think it was a project that was well done. One thing I do want to point out to you is that because of that change order, the city's contribution of ARPA funds went from $971,000 to $927,000. So you've got about $43,000 that is now in addition to what you have available for eligible projects, but you don't have to wait very long to use that money because Ryan has an opportunity for you on a later agenda item. EMS report, it's included in your packet, 296 calls last month, 178, or 60% of those were within the city. There was a shout out in that report to the street department for keeping their driveway clear during the ice storm, and although not included in the report, we do continue to hear good things from Hamilton EMS in their regards to the city's dispatch service. So well done. Street department, PD, fire department, I know is working very well with them. So I think it's been a very positive change and positive for us to be included in the delivery of the dispatch services. Sales tax continued a good month, a 6.5% increase over last year's previous year at the same time. WCID, it's a rather long section here, but really it boils down to about 2 or 3 things of importance in that meeting. Again, with this huge pot of money that the state has now, there are all sorts of ways, people are talking property tax relief. The state soil and conservation is looking like they're in for about $34 million additional dollars for O&M for these flood control dams, which is great. The other provision they also came up through because it was kind of a condition of the Sunset Commission was that there would be no local match. So previously, I think the match was about 10%. So that's positive. They've also put in at least a request for $150 million for that upgrade that we've talked about the last couple of years, where we've got a number of our dams, because of downstream development, have now been reclassified to high hazard. And taking a dam to a high hazard classification is a $10 to $15 million project typically. So if some of that money starts to flow, then we certainly have a project that's ready to go in terms of consideration. And then the last thing, just the TCEQ has granted a request for a contested hearing on the Pitt Creek subdivision. This is a subdivision west of town, outside of the city's ETJ. But the reason was the potential impact. You had 420 housing units at X number of 1,000 feet per lot of new additional impervious cover. What is the impact going to be to the flood control dams? And so it is a very non-political stance, which is we just want to make sure the water coming in, our dams can handle. It's structurally able to do that. If not, detain that water, et cetera. So more on that later. Auditors will be here at the end of the month. Normally we present the audit to an ad hoc committee of staff and council. It's then presented to council sometime in March for their acceptance. If you want to alter that, please let the mayor or direct us otherwise, but we'll go along with that protocol unless you tell us otherwise. Substandard buildings, I just wanted to get back with you and report that we have been formalizing the inventory, drafting some letters. We've also been taking a look at commercial properties that also are in a state of disrepair. As this moves forward, and as if people cannot comply, then the building official, construction board of adjustment, and city council may be involved for further action to correct the violations. Our park restrooms are back up and open, and I think I reported on this to you a couple of times. We had to close them down for a little bit, despite the best efforts of staff to keep those wet areas warm. It was just an uphill battle. So I think both Van and Chris are looking at more robust heating systems for their wet areas that they cannot sustain the continued cold that we had at the end of December. And skate park, we're making good progress on that. We've been very impressed with the quality of work of SPA. They are not only, they're even building above and beyond their plan set. The plan set called for a certain stem wall, certain depth, and they said, no, we're taking it all the way to the bottom. And so they're actually going above and beyond what the design plan says in some situations. That should be done in February. That was quick, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had any.
Any questions? Thank
you.
you, sir. I would, on behalf of the council and myself, just offer condolences to Councilman Clark's family. The service is tomorrow at 1 o'clock at Grace. 1 o'clock for visitation, 2 o'clock for the service. Randy's love of his community was evident in his service, and we wish them peace. We have no unfinished business. Our new business is 7.1, discussion and selection of a website photo contest.
Mayor and City Council, there were 4 photo entries submitted for the month of January.
Anyone have a favorite?
I move to select entry 1.
Second.
Have a motion for one?
I was seconding 1, but,
I hit on 4. Ooh, I like that one too.
Okay, we'll vote on motion for number 1. All those in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? I didn't notice any counts. Who voted yes?
Yes.
Okay, on option 2, and yours was number 4?
Yes.
Number 4?
I vote for 4.
You make a second for 4, and then we'll get a vote.
Ma'am,
Make a
Second for 4.
I think a second for 4.
I have a motion and a second for number 4. All those in favor?
Aye.
Is it a tie?
This is 2. Yeah. So we lost.
Oh, sorry.
1 wins.
Chuck, what's wrong with you?
Thank you very much. 7.2, discussion and presentation of the Lampasas Police Department 2022 Annual Racial Profiling Report. Chief Cummins.
Mayor and council, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you accumulation of our traffic data for the year of 2022. I have a short report for you, so if you'll humor me for just a moment. It's that time of year. Maybe. All right, here we go. In 2001, our legislature began the process of a racial profiling legislation, and it's been tweaked twice then, 2009 and 2017. And what we have now, I believe, is a pretty easy and not very difficult process to follow for all police agencies that conduct traffic stops to analyze all of their data collected throughout the year and present it to the governing bodies in the state of Texas. It's not that complicated, just a lot of details. Our Texas Criminal Code of Procedure and our Occupation Code is what spells out in these 9 categories of how we'll conduct our racial profiling information, how we'll conduct traffic stops, how we'll gather information and report it back. And it's really pretty simple. Our law says racial profiling is prohibited. Clear? It says that police departments or sheriff's departments or anybody that conducts traffic stops will have a policy on racial profiling, which we do. It requires our officers to collect certain data on their traffic citations and report it back to the department, which they have no choice, whether it's a physical citation or they're using one of our digital citations. They can't go forward unless they complete blanks. Our law tells us how we'll compile this data from these actual traffic citations. It also covers any liability, any rules, any civil penalties, whether we would make a mistake or do something on purpose. It clearly says in these 2 laws how that should be handled. It also provides for funding if an agency can't afford audio or video recording devices, how you can go for some help from the state, because that's very important. And then at the end of the day, while we're here today, how we as a police department or sheriff's department will take all of that data from all of those citations throughout the year, put them together in a report, analyze them, and then report them to the state and our governing body, which is you here today. Specifically on our policy that we're required by law to have, I want to make purpose. Our policy is clearly defined. There's no doubt about what it means because all the definitions are in it. It explains how we'll train our officers, not only in the police academy, but continued education while they're at our department about racial profiling and traffic stops and how we conduct ourselves professionally. If someone was to have a complaint about the citation and maybe suspect or even just want to know about it, there's a process for us to investigate that complaint and document how we do it. Public education, we have that on our website. We have information in the lobby. We're prepared to visit with anybody that would come in at any point about the way we do traffic stops and our data from the past. The actual citation data and collection, how we take that, i.e. Kelly Sangonet, our data entry clerk, how she takes all of those citations, each one of them, every day, make sure they're correct, and at the end of the month, it's all lined up. Therefore, at the end of the year, we're not running around trying to figure these things out. She's very good about that. In each and every citation, she makes sure that the T's and I's are crossed and dotted, specifically towards racial profile. Our policy tells our officers how they'll use their audio and video equipment, so there's no doubt that they do their best to audio and video every traffic stop. That oftentimes heads off any question. If there would be a question, we have that data to look at. That's why we have those that are so important. If we were to be in a position to have to take any corrective action with one of the officers at our department, our policy spells out how we'll do that and then how we'll document that for the future so we can always show these things are taken seriously. Not only is it the law, but it's right. And these are the things that we've done in the past as far as any complaints or issues involving our racial profile. There are two reports that the state requires us to do. One is the traditional, or what we call the full report. And though there are a lot of subcategories, it can be broke down into these main ones here. The total number of traffic stops for the year, where they were at, did we know the race or ethnicity of the person prior to the stop, what that race or ethnicity actually was, the reason for the stop, violator's gender, did we conduct a search? If so, why did we conduct a search? Did we find anything that we searched? What did we find? The result of the stop. In other words, was there a warning, a citation, an arrest, a combination? Did we make an arrest based on this traffic stop? And if so, did we have to use force that rose to the level of bodily injury? Or, for a very vague definition, pain? Did that result in having to put our hands on something? And did we have any racial profiling complaints throughout the entire year? And once that full report has been done, we have to complete an analysis of that basic information. Now, there's two columns on this one slide here. On the left is the race and ethnicity column, and the state has this breakdown into 5 categories: Caucasian, African American, Hispanic, Asian, or Native American. Now, each one of the citations, the person is identified through one of these and then compared to the actual number of contacts, searches. Was the search consensual, or did we have probable cause, meaning we didn't need to ask for consent, or was there a custody arrest? So in other words, pick one. Let's say Hispanic. For each one of the citations where a person was identified as Hispanic, we then analyze how many of our stops were Hispanic, how many Hispanics were searched, how many Hispanics consented to the search, or how many Hispanics did we just have probable cause and didn't need to ask or choose to ask for consent, and how many Hispanics were actually arrested off of those traffic stops. We do that for each of the 5 there, the Caucasian, the African American, the Asian, and the Native American as well, to come up with an analysis of all the total traffic stops. To summarize all of that into the next and almost final slide. So for the year of 2022, Lampasas Police Department had 3,348 traffic stops. Of those, we only searched 168 times. Contraband we discovered 118 times of those 168 searches. Of those 3,348 traffic stops, we issued 2,298 warnings. We issued 896 citations. We only made 46 arrests off of those 3,348 traffic stops and only used physical force resulting in what would be categorized as bodily injury one time. And we had 0 racial profiling complaints throughout the year. Now, on the right is the analysis part, and that's a small section of that second report. And there is you some numbers and percentages. So of all those 3,348, only one person identified as Alaska or Native American. 55 is Asian Pacific Islander. 216 is African American. 2,327 is Anglo. And 749 is Hispanic out of all of those traffic stops throughout the year. So cumulatively, with all of this information, and it's a lot, if you had a minute to flip through the actual full report, you'll notice all of the subcategories, numbers and numbers and numbers from these, and then the analysis. So at the end of the day, what do I, as a leader of the department, or you as the government, or our manager, look at this information and say? Well, I know what I say. I look at it and go, huh, that's interesting. But what does it actually mean? Those cumulative numbers on this last page here, the big numbers. And what I think it can mean, and again, it's an opinion, it would be nice if we had another Apple like the city of Lampasas that was exactly like us, with the exact highways, the exact school district in our town, the exact businesses and light industry that brought people in and out, that would be affected by these traffic stops. But we don't have one just like us. We can find some close maybe, but not just exactly to say these numbers are exact. So I think a few things we can do is we can look basically at our makeup of our known ethnicity here and say, those are pretty close, and they are. And I can look back like at the last 5 years of our data and say, the numbers haven't changed a whole lot, and they haven't. And I can look at the number of searches compared to the stops, compared to the contraband seized, and I can look at 0 complaints on racial profiling, and I can think, we must be doing pretty good because nobody's driving, right? And then I can tell you that, though I've been around a long time and done this quite a while, I'm not a criminologist, I'm not a sociologist, and I'm not a statistician. And someone else might look at it a little different and have some suggestions or recommendations. But I can tell you, I don't think we're out of line. And that's my opinion with our numbers at the end of the year here for this year and the last 5 years as I've looked back in reverse. And I can tell you, we're very open for any recommendations or suggestions. If anybody has questions tonight or would like to come visit further or at any point, we're always open to this. And I can also tell you that I don't believe I've ever known anybody on purpose to pick on a certain group while I've been working that I've seen. And I think we have a culture at our department in our city that if one of our officers thought that was happening, or one of our managers, or one of our other city employees, it would be brought to light quicker than someone would have an opportunity to make a complaint. And I don't think we'd ever be to the issue where we would reach the data sheet. I really do. That's, I believe, our culture in our city employees, and our city population. I just don't think it would happen. But again, I'm not perfect. I'm not all-knowing. I can present you the numbers, and that's how I feel about them. And I think we're in good shape, and I think we do a really good job, and we would take care of business immediately if something happened where we weren't.
And I think council would agree. We think you do a great job as well. If you could stay there for a moment, and our only task is to make a motion to acknowledge receipt of the report, if someone could do that.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now, do we have any questions for Chief?
I got one question, just kind of the opposite. How much, is there any data on how much abuse that our officers take from those that are stopped or approached?
Like physically, like in
Yes, sir.
provocation or
Yes, sir.
something? I don't have that right here, but yes, anytime there is a use of force, whether it be a traffic stop or whether we're just on a call for service at a house, our officers are required to have a report done almost immediately and reviewed by their immediate supervisor up to the patrol lieutenant and then on my desk. And then we file those for years, and they're in the office. So yes, I could easily have that for you, but it's not often, to be honest. We get in small scuffles where there's scrapes and bruises, but doesn't happen a lot. And I think that's, again, though we do have to put our hands on people often, I think it's not bad, and I think it's a testament to our community and our officers for being able to handle themselves without getting hurt or hurt someone else. But it does happen, and I could get you those numbers if you need.
That's okay.
You bet.
Chief, can you do you have the capability of breaking down on the PC searches, I saw 90, how many of those resulted in arrest?
How many of the probable cause and searches? I could, I don't think that's right there, but that's something I can figure out.
I just wondered if that was there.
Glad to.
Thank you.
Kelly's awful proud of her numbers. If anybody ever wants to visit with her, she gets ready, so I'll be glad to get that for you if you'd like to.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions for Chief? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Thank you much.
7.3, discussion and possible action regarding an ordinance calling for a general election to elect the expired terms of the mayor, council member places 1, 2, 6 for the city council of the city of Lampasas, Texas, to be held on the 6th day of May, 2023, providing for polling times and places, providing for early voting, and providing for bilingual election materials.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this is the first reading of the ordinance to call the election for the mayor, council member places 1, 2, and 6 for city council of the city of Lampasas. And I'm just asking for a motion this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm going to start this piece of paper down. We'll all need to sign it and get it back to Becky. 7.4, discussion and possible action to issue the order of election for municipalities for the May 6th, 2023 general election.
Yes, this item is actually on the agenda to issue the order of election, and this is what I'm going to have each of you sign this evening. And this is just the same procurement we do every year with regarding to the municipal election that we go through.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. 7.5, discussion and possible action regarding approval, denial, or approval with modification to the preliminary plat of Gibson Branch.
This item was discussed during public hearing, and at this time, I'm asking to consider a motion to approve, deny, or approve with modifications a preliminary plat for Estates of Gibson Branch, Phase 1, 187.36 acres, a subdivision within the ETJ of the city of Lampasas, Lampasas County.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Discussion and possible action regarding approval, denial, or approval with modification to the final plat of Gibson Branch.
Mayor and council, this item was discussed during public hearing, and at this time, I'm asking to consider a motion to approve the final plat of Gibson Branch, Phase 1, 187.36 acres, subdivision within the ETJ of the city of Lampasas, Lampasas County.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thanks. 7.7, discussion and possible action to award a bid to LC Paving and Construction for the US 281 water line improvements in an amount not to exceed $143,247.50.
Good evening, council, mayor. This particular project is something that is tied to the TxDOT improvements out on US 281. This is the water line to be constructed to connect underneath, or I guess basically parallel with Naruna Road. It'll go under 281 to Boone's RV Park. In this project is LC Paving and Construction, LLC, was the low bidder at $143,247.50. This is a relocation project that includes boring under the road approximately about 300 feet of 8-inch water line will be installed. Some of that in the bore, some will just be open cut. We have been coordinating this with TxDOT. They have a UIR program, which is their utility installation program that our engineer has submitted, basically saying we'll be doing some improvements to the right-of-way. They track that. But at this time, our recommendation is to move forward with this particular contractor while the engineer has vetted this particular contractor with prior jobs and with other cities. And the response back was to move forward. One thing I would like to note is the engineer's estimate is something I always try to look at and consider when you're looking across the board at various bids. And actually, the engineer's cost estimate was $144,974.50. So they were very close, within almost 1% of the overall cost, which a lot of times, sheds light on, hey, this contractor, is looking at the same types of items and is consistent on the bidding. So I wanted to share that. The only other thing that I did want to share is the city manager mentioned $100,000 had been set aside through ARPA funding. That's the federal funding that's allowed for infrastructure. We had already dedicated that money. The $43,247.50 with council's approval will also be pulled from the ARPA funding, still leaving about $700 from the savings from the business park. And so that's what we were looking at for this particular project. We were lucky for the change order at the business park to allow some extra ARPA funds.
Great.
And I'll stand for any questions.
Could I get a motion?
I move that we approve the bid from LC Paving and Construction LLC for the utility relocations and preparing for Highway 281 construction in the amount of not to exceed the amount of $143,247.50, and authorize the city manager to execute all related documents.
Have a motion?
Second.
Are there any questions of Mr. Ryan?
It didn't last very long, did it? That 43 grand.
It did not.
Didn't even
We
hit the
really
bank
got
yet.
lucky.
How long will that project take, Ryan?
This particular project, if it took 30 days, I'd be surprised. You have the boring operation should take them, if everything goes smoothly, probably 3 to 4 days tops. The open cut and the tie-ins, I would say, several weeks to make those cuts. I would think no longer than 30 days. But this particular type of project, depending on how clean the right-of-way is, they've already started, and I'm sure council's noticed, they've removed some of the obstructions in the right-of-way, so that frees up some area that we can set up and do this type of work.
Where's their labor on there?
The labor, so as far as the bid items, so typically what's structured in there is labor, any kind of incidentals, equipment is structured into that particular bid item. They've got mobilization, which is separate. Mobilization is just bringing in the contractor for their hotel rooms or whatever it may be if they're out of town. But all the items, so like excavation would include incidentals and equipment. Installing valves is included in the labor and the incidental. So the bid should cover each and every one of those items that includes labor or, tools to be used or equipment should be inclusive in that bid item.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item is discussion and possible action to declare 11 Motorola Model XTS 1500 handheld radios and 7 Maycom brand in-car radios as surplus and to direct staff to dispose of them as state law allows.
Mayor and council, thank you for your time. In all honesty, we're doing a little house cleaning towards the end of the year like we do about this time every year. And we have a box of radio equipment, and there's a handful of handhelds, the 11 Motorola handhelds that are mentioned. And then we also have quite a few in-car radios, the ones that would be in the car. Been there a while. The Motorola's were probably bought, I would guess, maybe 20 years ago. They are out of date. They're no longer sold. Parts are probably unavailable unless they're from a secondary source, and they've just been there. Prior to our new console, which is working on 3 to 4 years old now, they would have operated with that old system. They will not even work with our current system, with our current car radios or our current console. They'll just talk to each other if they're charged up. Same way with the in-car radios that are the Maycom brand. They came from a grant through the state of Texas, through the COG, through Homeland Security, and they have been out of date for that long as well, probably 10 to 12 years. They will not work with our console. The Motorola brand were purchased by the city. The Maycoms were through the grant. We've done the work back through emergency management coordinator through the county, back through the COG, and have the documentation that says, yes, you can hand these to another agency if you'd like. They have no value. You just need to keep up with it and attach this to your inventory and keep it in-house. So I have that documentation in those emails to support moving the Maycoms, but it's up to you on the Motorola handhelds. But through conversation, Lieutenant Montgomery with a employee of Hamilton PD, these would actually be an upgrade from what they're currently using. They'll work with their system. It'll give them a few extras, and they'd be glad to take these off our hand, and they'd go to a good cause for them until they can get something a little better in a few years. So I'd like to hand them to them if we could.
I'll make a motion to declare the 11 Motorola Model XTS 1500 handheld radios and 7 Maycom brand in-car radios as surplus and to direct staff to dispose of as state law allows.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Does anyone have any questions, concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item is discussion and possible action regarding the approval of a resolution nominating candidate for election to the Central Texas Water Supply Corporation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is something that we do annually. We ask that you appoint somebody to this board. In the past, you have continued to appoint the city manager, and he has participated in the board meetings and actively participates in the ongoing, so we would like that you would appoint him as well at your pleasure if you choose to.
Move to approve resolution and appointment of the city manager as our representative to the Central Texas Water Supply Corporation Board of Directors.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Any
you.
opposed? Next item is discussion and possible action to appoint 2 members of the Lampasas City Council plus the mayor to a joint city-county committee to study impacts and planning of a relief route connecting US 281, US 183, and US 190. We do have 2 council members who have volunteered for this. Mr. Pierce and Mr. Williamson, along with myself. We will meet with the county judge, I believe, and Mr. Rainwater shortly to start a process of determining how the county and the city should react to this. So if I could get a motion for that.
I'll make a motion to appoint the mayor and Councilman Herb Pierce, Councilman Chuck Williamson to be part of the city-county committee.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item, discussion and possible action regarding the appointment to fill a vacancy on the Capital Improvement Program Committee.
It's me again, guys. We currently have a vacancy on our Capital Improvement Program Committee. Typically, we do this in September, but this is such a unique board that meets during our budget time. So I'm asking that you consider appointment of one of the 2 applicants that I have in the packet. I will say that I have put in there Mr. Craig Hammett and sorry, got a little distracted. Mr. Tim Heffley and Craig Hammett have both submitted applications with regarding to an interest in this committee. I will say, however, they both do have jobs, so they have both voiced their opinion to me that it may or may not be difficult for them to be here at noon on Thursdays when we meet. So I told them that was fine, that I would, make that as a, consideration for them as well. They didn't think it would be a problem all the time, but just sometimes it may come up because they do work throughout the day. So however, I was going to leave it up to you and your discretion of which you would choose to appoint, or if you'd want to table it for this evening and not make any motion at all, I can recruit more to see if there's somebody who may have more availability to be there at noon on Thursdays.
I move to appoint Craig Hammett. to the board because he has been very interested in, or the CIP, because he's been very interested in getting involved. And he has good knowledge with some of his experience.
A second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments or suggestions?
You feel more comfortable getting some other people that might have more availability on there, or considering?
Like I said, they were both very open and honest with me. They both said that they may have difficulty getting here regularly because we do meet twice. We meet every other month. Every other week we meet up and through budget, normally until May. So it's only for a few months, but they both were very open in stating that they didn't know they'd be able to make every meeting, is what they addressed to me, because I called them both this morning just to confirm that they did want to be a part of the committee. But they were both willing to participate. I mean, it's completely up to y'all. And like I said, if it becomes a problem, there's nothing wrong with us, finding another appointment if we need to, if they can't make the meeting and they're not going to be able to add value to the board. But at this time, I think either of them would be a really good candidate, and they're willing to participate. I'm sorry? Yes, I did tell y'all it's Thursdays at noon. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? I do have a motion for Mr. Hammett.
Damn it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We will adjourn into an executive session. We are going into executive for deliberation concerning the potential purchase, exchange, lease, acquisition, sale, and/or value of real property. If I could get a motion to adjourn into executive.
Move to adjourn into executive session.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Mayor and council, without objection, I'd invite the Assistant City Manager and Economic Development Director.
Adjourn the executive session and reconvene in regular session.
I make a motion to authorize the city manager to negotiate and finalize terms of a special provision contained in a commercial real estate contract between the City of Lampasas and CNB Lampasas Investors, LTD.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Let's go home.